And the Miami Marlins, who are one of the hottest teams in baseball right now, 30-14 since June 13th. 30-14. And the first time at 500 since April 8th. Got a little bit of 2003 magic to it because that was the best record they've had in that period, in a 44-game period since 2003, where they won the World Series. Mike Rizzo, Colin Russo, Damian Perez.
You're bought in, dude.
I love a fun team that's got nothing to lose. They got everything to gain. There's always going to be that hot up-and-coming, out-of-nowhere team a la Diamondbacks every single year that sort of rumbles into the fold of the postseason race when it gets down to it. Now, the NL has a lot of headhunters and a lot of heavy hitters, heavyweights. But for a team that has sort of snuck their way back into, at least in the race, because the MLB is as wide open as it's ever been in terms of a postseason race with about 8 weeks to go. And you got 100 teams that can possibly make a 2-week run and thrust themselves into playoff position. That is interesting. And for that's the type of environment that the Marlins could, I guess, thrive on. There's one team in the entire league that the Yankees do not have a plus winning percentage against in their history, franchise's history. The Yankees, the winningest franchise in Major League Baseball, and it's the Miami Marlins. They some reason have their number. And if the takeaway from the weekend is not about the Marlins, it's more about the Yankees, fine. But you could sit there and bash the Yankees at the same time, compliment the Marlins for what they're doing. They didn't necessarily sell. I know they shipped Sanchez to Houston, but other than that, they didn't do a ton to get rid of a bunch of guys, similar to how the Pittsburgh and how Minnesota, how all those guys in Cleveland a little bit, how they got rid of a couple guys. They didn't do that. And they stuck around to their guns, and now they're one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Dare I say, a little magic in Miami doesn't hurt.
Now, if Kyle, the last 2 years they shipped out, the Louis Arise, and they moved on from players for the past 2 years, but you might as well stand pat if you're the Marlins. Colin, they're not. I'm shutting. August 4th, I'm shutting it down. They're not making the playoffs. The Padres are better. I don't see the Mets. The Mets are 63-49. The Padres are 62-50. I think the Miami Marlins are a great story. Could they be something maybe next year as they get more starting pitching? I don't think they have the pitching to keep this up. I love Kyle Stowers, NL Player of the Month. Colin, I have no idea. Do not ask me the last time a Miami Marlin player won the NL Player of the Month. It was probably young Carlos Stanton 8 years ago. But I'm going to shut this down now because I don't think they're better than the Padres. I don't think they're better than the Mets. And I even think
they don't even scare you yet.
No, God, no.
30-14 since June 14th does not scare you.
I think a Tito Francona Cincinnati Red team probably has a better chance of sneaking into that final wild card spot. I don't think it scares me, but it doesn't. I think the longevity, I don't see the longevity there. With Yuri Perez, Alcantara, Cal Quantrill, former guard Cal Quantrill.
Hold on, but they're hot. They got magic. This is what happens every
August, bud.
What was Detroit last year? Think about Detroit last year. This is what this after post
deadline,
post All-Star break. This is the type of team that's going to capitalize on sort of second half run.
But Kyle, hang on quickly. AL's different. Even last year, the AL was miserable, brother. You got the Padres and the Mets. You're not going toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Royals for the final wild card spot. You know what I'm saying?
Well, here's what we're going to. The remaining parts of their schedule, they got the Astros, they got the Braves, they got the Guardians, they got the Red Sox, they got the Cardinals, Blue Jays. They play a fairly tough schedule because of the division that they play in. The Braves are never going to be an easy out despite being 15 games back. And the Mets, on the other hand, 63-49. They have their own plethora of issues on top of that, but then they finish off the year. They got the Nationals for 2 series. They got to deal with the Rockies. They got the Rangers who are not great, but then they got a couple against the Phillies. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but if you want to make a bet, and I should have taken this over. I was thinking about this when the over-unders were hitting back in April, and I didn't. And they were like low 70s, and they're totally going to hit that. But the Miami Marlins, they're in a peculiar position where they got absolutely everything to gain and absolutely nothing to lose. That is dangerous in baseball, and all it takes is a run. All it takes is a run. And I'm not saying that they're going to be able to, especially after what the Padres just spent, to capitalize on this year. But 55-55, sitting at 30-14 since June 13th, that's got to count for something. That's got to count for something. They're not just doing this for craps and giggles. That's not what they're doing this for. And they just took down the Yankees, who are a mess in a series over at Lone Depot Park where they were selling out the stadium. So it's got to count for something that there's a little bit of momentum here that, the Marlins, they snuck into the postseason 2 years ago. But a team that has done a whole lot of nothing because they don't spend anything. But a little bit of juice and momentum can go a long way in baseball, especially with only an 8-week period.
I think it's a fun thing for Fish fans right now. Where last year you're bottom of the barrel, worst you could possibly get. This year, start of the season, you had nothing to root for. Oh God, here we go again. I like that they're going on this kind of run. I wish it was in the AL. If it was in the AL column, I'd probably have more hope in them getting into the postseason. I know they just beat I keep bringing up the Padres. They just won 2 out of 3 games against them. I understand all this stuff. But with the schedule and how bad the back half is for Miami towards the end of the year, a lot of those teams are going to be competing for playoff spots, must-win games and whatnot. I don't see it. I don't see the magic of them sneaking into the playoffs, especially with how hard the Mets. I know it's a different year, Kyle. Mets, a team that was a couple games away from a World Series last year, and the Padres, who gave away their best 18-year-old prospect to go all in for the playoffs. So with that, I can't see them making the playoffs.
The Padres traded 7 of their top 10 prospects in exchange for a handful of a variety of different players.
The 18-year-old kid, I forget his. Forgive
Leo
me.
DeVries.
Thank you. And that was one where I went, all right, man. If the Padres are doing all this, they are serious.
Yeah, they're aggressive buyers.
They don't care about draining the farm system to go for it. That's why listen, just because you spend money and acquire players doesn't mean you're going to go on a run in baseball.
They do it every year. They do
every single year. But with them still being 6 games back, and with that schedule coming up,
8 weeks to go.
I hope the headline that I read isn't Marlins drop 8 in a row, or I think that's more likely to happen, Kyle, than them making the playoffs.
They're 30-14 since this is not just last weekend. This is a month and a half of a body of work.
I think it's a lot of young players who don't know any better and are having fun. And maybe
don't know any better.
They don't know any better. They're having fun out there. They're winning games. They haven't,
what is that supposed to mean? What do you mean don't know any better?
They don't know any better. They're beating the Giants right now, the best teams in the league, and I just don't think it's sustainable. I think that when I mean they don't know any better, I don't think it's sustainable right now, the run that they're going on. I don't see it happening for another month. Kyle, you could ship in a crow from Peoria, Illinois if the Miami Marlins make the damn playoffs. I'm going to go with the Mets, and I'm going to go with the Padres. I'll go with Tito's Red Machine down there in Cincinnati over the Marlins still.
I got to give them credit. They beat the Padres in a series, like you said. They beat the Brewers in a series, who are the hottest team in the league right now. They just beat the Yankees in a series. They got a little bit of momentum here. A team to watch. A team to declare that they're in the postseason? No, but they're a team to watch, because it'd be foolish to say otherwise, because teams that get hot in the second half of the year happens every single time. Every single time that there's a team that out of nowhere who is under 500, out of the mix, back into the mix all of a sudden, and all of a sudden they're in a playoff condition or a playoff spot or a playoff opportunity towards September.
Can we talk Kyle Stowers for a sec, the NL Player of the Month? Colin, how about that run of players that the Baltimore Orioles had in their farm system?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kyle Stowers, not to get too into it, but he's a former Oriole who came up with the Kiersteads and the Jackson Holidays and the Gunnar Henderson. What a draft process the Orioles had, Kyle, after being miserable for 10 years. That's a fine young player. Kyle Stowers is a fine young player. All-star, obviously, from this past year as well. I think they found something in him. I think that if you want to if the one thing I will write home about for that baseball team is that young man, Kyle Stowers, and from that lucrative Baltimore Orioles farm system.
Yeah, he's a great player, and he's one of the top, kind of up-and-comers who have blazed his way into contention here out of nowhere. But I don't think the NL Central, or the NL East, I should say, is as good as advertised. And I think that outside of the Phillies, who are completely all in, there are 2 teams in Major League Baseball who, in my opinion, are putting all of their chips into the center of the table. It's the Padres and the Phillies. So from that perspective, I understand that I don't think Philly's going to fall out of any sort of contention. So now you're fighting for that second place there, and the Padres are sort of going to be sitting at second place because they got the Dodgers sitting there. But those are the 2 teams that are as desperate as any team in Major League Baseball. So if you're the Miami Marlins and you sort of got everything to gain, nothing to lose, who says they can't spoil somebody's season a little later on and take 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 against the Mets to knock them out of contention?
You hate the Mets.